I am Kanata, and I, that is we. Villages of life that stretch from sea to sea to sea. A human constellation, as long as the rivers run. Kanata, Kanacha, Canadian, we are Canadian.
Sync and Symm, synchronicities and symmetry. Today we're going to identify 6 features that shaped us and made us who we are. 5 of these are physical, that occurred before there were people or human culture here. 3 begin with the letter A. The first is the word aqueous. It means watery, as the words aquifer or aquarium. Canada has 7% of the world's fresh water, found not only in the large Great Lakes and many rivers, but in the thousands of tiny ones, hundreds of thousands that dot the rocks of the Canadian Shield, and in the meltwater of permafrost and pingos. Like the importance of the human body, water is much of Canada's surface. It reinforces our earthiness seen in the life, plant and animal that lives here, more than if we lived on rocky steppes, desert, or an alpine plateau. The second A word is accretion. The parts of our landmass acquired from other continental plates, like pieces of Africa that split off hundreds of millions of years ago and drifted across what is now the Atlantic to impact on our east coast like Nova Scotia, or anchor slightly offshore as Newfoundland or Cape Breton. On the west coast, we picked up pieces of the South Pacific plate, including lava flows we find on Haida Gwaii and Vancouver Island on the Cocosila River. A third group is the islands of the Arctic archipelago that were once part of a hydrocarbon-producing area in a tropical sea, accretions from other ancient coasts. The third A word, and latest to impact on us, is Atlantic. Not just the ocean expanding off our eastern side, but the rift in that side that became the Gulf of St. Lawrence and opened a passage to the heart of the continent through our mightiest river. No equivalent east-west channel across the United States or Mexico occurs, though the Mississippi comes closest. The Atlantic access has not always been and came relatively late in our prehistory. Aeons ago, more of Canada's landmass drained to the south through the Mississippi system. Today, only one tiny area of southeastern Alberta does, through the Milk River to the St. Mary's in Montana. Later, the lower Great Lakes drained to the southeast through what is today the Erie Canal of the Hudson-Mohawk system. Then, about 10 to 15,000 years ago, uplift of the Niagara Escarpment caused by melting of the overlying glacial ice sheet created Niagara Falls and sent the waters of Lake Erie and Ontario spilling over into a new channel northeast down what is now the St. Lawrence, overwhelming and capturing the Ottawa River that was already there and creating a new enlarged portal in the Atlantic that reached up beyond Stadacona and Hochelaga, Quebec and Montreal, and carried later explorers Cartier and Champlain far inland. Today that has been extended and deepened by locks and canals, the St. Lawrence Seaway, for deep-sea shipping to Duluth and Chicago in the U.S. and Toronto, Sault Ste. Marie, and Thunder Bay on the Canadian side. This St. Lawrence opening occurred late enough to figure in Indigenous mythology, in a struggle between Glooskap and the Genie of the Atlantic, a narrative explaining the creation of Niagara Falls. Let's set these 3 A words, aqueous, accretion, and Atlantic, side by side, and intersperse them with other letters between. Between the first 2 A's is an N for northern, the cold climate that distinguishes what is now Canada from the rest of Turtle Island. The cold that holds the north half of the continent in its grip and closes the St. Lawrence for 3 to 4 months of each year limited the flow of migrants to North America from Europe. The first French to come here barely survived the winter, Without this barrier, the impacts of contact would have been far more rapid and disastrous for First Nations than they were. This narrower passage in time limited the flow of traders and voyageurs into the interior and led to the founding of the Métis Nation as far inland as the prairies and eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains. The next letter to be inserted between the second and third A's is a T for tenuous, stretching out of a band of villages along lakes, rivers, and plains to become the transcontinental waterway Alexander Mackenzie followed through the Peace and Parsnip rivers to the headwaters of the Fraser, then across the coastal mountains to Bella Bella on the Pacific. The railway followed that waterway, with variations, 90 years later. At the beginning of the three A's with an N and a T between, let's place a K for kayak, the Inuit Arctic means of water transport, or its southern cousin, the birch bark canoe. With these 5 physical features, and the vehicles created by First Nations, we have the pre-contact potential that would become the multicultural, transcontinental land bridge and portage between Europe and Asia, the Kanata connection that would become a global village. Think of that next time you see our indigenous name, Kanata. For Kanata Connections, I'm David Watts.
Kanata, au long des rivières, les villages lumineux au-delà des frontières, a human constellation as long as the rivers run. Kanata, Kanata, Canadien, we are Canadian.